Join us on Patreon and become part of our journey to uncover history's untold stories. Your support helps us create in-depth content, bring hidden narratives to life, and keep history alive for everyone.
History is often told by the victors, shaping narratives that glorify their conquests while erasing the resistance of those who fought against oppression. One of the most overlooked yet crucial chapters in world history is the long and fierce struggle between black natives of Africa and Portuguese slavers. These conflicts, often dismissed or minimized in historical records, were far more than mere skirmishes. They were organized, sustained, and deeply impactful wars of resistance waged by African societies determined to protect their land, culture, and people from the horrors of the transatlantic slave trade. When the Portuguese first set foot on African soil in the late 15th century, they encountered powerful and sophisticated kingdoms that were more than capable of defending themselves. These African societies, including the Kingdom of Ndongo, the Kongo Kingdom, the Mbangala warriors, and the resistance forces of Queen Nzinga, fought back against Portuguese incursions with remarkable strategy and resilience. From the dense forests of Angola to the savannas of Mozambique, these battles raged for centuries, fueled by the sheer will of the native people to resist enslavement and colonial domination. This article seeks to shed light on the forgotten battles waged by black natives against Portuguese slavers. Through historical accounts, oral traditions, and archival sources, it will reconstruct the fierce resistance movements that defied the might of the Portuguese Empire. These stories of defiance, courage, and sacrifice challenge the prevailing narrative that African societies passively succumbed to the slave trade. Instead, they reveal a continent that fought relentlessly against one of the darkest episodes of human history. The arrival of the Portuguese in Africa during the late 15th century marked the beginning of a devastating era. Initially, Portuguese explorers, led by Diogo Chao and later Vasco da Gama, sought trade routes to Asia but soon realized that Africa held vast economic potential. Gold, ivory, and other resources were valuable commodities, but it was human lives that would become the primary focus of Portuguese exploitation. The Kongo Kingdom was among the first to experience Portuguese influence. King Nzinga of Ndongo converted to Christianity in 1491, adopting the name João I in an effort to foster alliances with Portuguese. However, this diplomatic engagement soon turned into an exploitative relationship as Portuguese traders increasingly demanded enslaved Africans in exchange for European goods and weapons. By the early 16th century, the Portuguese had established numerous trading posts along the coast, and the demand for enslaved people skyrocketed. However, the African rulers and warriors were not passive participants in this new order. Many of them recognized the Portuguese threat and took up arms to protect their sovereignty and people from forced enslavement. The battles that ensued were some of the most intense and sustained conflicts between indigenous Africans and European invaders. One of the earliest recorded instances of African resistance against Portuguese slavers came from the Kongo Kingdom. The Portuguese had initially been welcomed as trade partners, but as their demands for captives increased, tensions escalated. King Afonso, 1506 to 1543, a devout Christian who had once embraced Portuguese influence, found himself in direct conflict with the Europeans when he realized the devastating effects of the slave trade on his people. Afonso repeatedly wrote letters to King João III of Portugal, pleading for an end to the enslavement of his subjects. When diplomatic efforts failed, he took military action. The Kongo warriors engaged in several battles against Portuguese slave traders, attempting to dismantle their strongholds and disrupt their human trafficking networks. These efforts, while partially successful, could not fully halt the relentless demand for African slaves. The most decisive confrontation came in 1665 at the Battle of Mbuala. King Antonio, a successor of Afonso, led a force of nearly 20,000 men against the Portuguese. Despite their valor, the Congolese army was defeated and Antonio was killed. This marked a turning point in Congo-Portuguese relations, leading to the kingdom's decline as Portuguese influence grew stronger. However, the resistance did not end there. Underground movements and localized rebellions persisted for decades, keeping the spirit of defiance alive. Perhaps the most legendary figure in the fight against Portuguese slavers was Queen Nzinga of Ndongo in Matamba, 1583 to 1663. Born into the ruling family of Ndongo, modern-day Angola, Nzinga witnessed firsthand the brutality of the Portuguese slave trade. Her people were captured and sold in increasing numbers, and the Portuguese, along with their Mbangala mercenaries, sought to expand their control over Angola. When her brother, King Golem Band, was unable to resist Portuguese encroachment, Nzinga took matters into her own hands. As a skilled diplomat and military strategist, she initially negotiated a peace treaty with the Portuguese in 1624. However, when the treaty was broken, she waged a relentless war against them for nearly 4 decades. Nzinga formed strategic alliances with the Dutch, launched guerrilla attacks on Portuguese forts, and even integrated escaped slaves into her army, turning them into formidable warriors. Her innovative military tactics and use of psychological warfare made her one of the most feared opponents of the Portuguese. Though she was never able to completely expel the Portuguese from Angola, her resistance significantly slowed their expansion and inspired future generations of African freedom fighters. While much of the resistance took place on African soil, enslaved Africans who managed to escape Portuguese captivity in Brazil established settlements known as quilombos. The most famous of these was Palmares, a large community of escaped slaves, indigenous peoples, and even some European outcasts who banded together to resist Portuguese oppression. Palmares, located in present-day Brazil, was a beacon of African resilience. Led by the legendary warrior Zumbi, the Quilombo resisted multiple Portuguese invasions for nearly a century. Using the dense forests as their stronghold, the warriors of Palmares waged guerrilla warfare against Portuguese forces, successfully repelling numerous attacks. In 1695, after years of relentless assaults, Palmares fell to the Portuguese, and Zumbi was captured and executed. Despite its destruction, the legacy of Palmares lived on as a symbol of resistance and African unity against enslavement. The battles between black natives and Portuguese slavers were not isolated incidents, but part of a vast and ongoing struggle against enslavement and colonial domination. African warriors, kings, and queens fought with unwavering determination to protect their people and their way of life. Though many of these conflicts ended in Portuguese victories, the resistance they encountered significantly hindered their expansion and served as a powerful testament to African agency and resilience. These stories, often overshadowed by the broader history of European imperialism, deserve to be remembered and honored. The courage of the Congo warriors, the strategic brilliance of Queen Nzinga, and the defiant spirit of Palmares all serve as reminders that Africa was never a passive victim of history. It was a continent of fighters, leaders, and visionaries who refused to be subjugated.